Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be making some... Hey guys, today we're making a bunch of jigs out of a whole bunch of plywood. Yeah, actually, it's just a couple of pieces of plywood and we're gonna make one jig. Although we're making a quick spline jig for this video is not really about the jig itself. It's more about what you can do with it after you make one. I'm gonna make mine out of this old piece of shelving. Does not matter in the least bit as far as what material you make it out of. There's tons of videos already on the subject, so we're gonna skip over all that. We're gonna make one real quick, and then we're gonna move to the interesting stuff, which is not this. At the core of any spline jig that you're gonna find on the internet or in a book or wherever consists of two boards put together in order to make 90 degrees if you look at them like this, but we want them to be like this at a 45 so we can fit our frames or whatever in there and it holds it securely so we can cut our splines. Put this together, put a bottom on it, put a side on it, and that's about it. Now we got another scrap of our shelf. Mark the center, put the center, take a square, make sure that we are at 45 degrees to the bottom. I'm gonna mark that for the simple fact that I wanna put some glue on there and I don't wanna smear it all over high heaven. I guess this also gives us an opportunity to drill a couple of holes. And just like last time, we'll use them as clamps until the glue dries. Get a CA glue for our clamp, clampy clamp. Then check for square. What we've done right here could absolutely be your spline jig. You run it up against your fence, cut, 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 got your splines. I have already made this other jig that I use for all kinds of different stuff that fits over my table saw fence. I just drilled a couple of holes in this. I'm gonna take a couple of bolts, run said bolts through the jig that I already have, put a couple of washers on there and some knobs, and I have a removable jig so it rides on my fence and makes it extra secure, which I like. Tell you one thing before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we don't want to forget to remove our temporary clamps because that could have been not good. I used 1/2 inch material here. Yes, it is scrap, but I used 1/2 inch and I didn't put a bottom on it because I want this as close to the table as possible. Because a little bit of the secret in our process here is you don't always have to use a full-size table saw blade. I'm gonna be using a circular saw blade, not because it's smaller, but because it's thinner. It has a super thin kerf that opens up all kinds of possibilities for doing really thin veneers, or in my case, I'm gonna inlay some brass in there as our splines. Using different types of blades works really well. And yes, typically you'd want a blade that cuts a flat bottom, but when it's this thin, it's honestly not an issue. I haven't seen any gaps. Once you put this stuff in there and get the glue in there, everything works out fine. Use some creativity. First experiment, circular saw blade. Plus it makes my underpowered saw feel like it has power. So it's pretty easy to do straight splines, right? So how about we do angled splines? I angle my blade to about 30 degrees. You don't want 45. Now we're gonna move this bad boy over, make another cut so we know where the saw kerf is, and then we're gonna get some really fancy splines.
Oh, I'm so fancy and moist.
The cool thing about this is you make a cut, you flip the thing around. If you have something to reference up against, they're gonna be perfectly even from each edge. We're gonna make these two cuts and see what it looks like. So now, check that out. We're gonna have splines at an angle. Very fancy. We can basically take any variation we want with the thin blade at 90 degrees, a thin blade at 30 degrees, or whatever degrees we want. Some really cool effects with the angled splines, and then of course, with variations of brass and other types of wood and make it look super cool. So that's what we're gonna do now, is work on the inlays and see what the finished product looks like. Now for our final trick, almost final trick, I thought it'd be really cool on some thin stock that you might make a small box out of to inlay brass actually as the splines. I think that would be really neat. I'm gonna use epoxy. I'm not gonna use wood glue because it wouldn't stick to the brass very well, but these slots with our thin saw blade works out pretty darn well to double these up. Once you get it sanded down, I think it's gonna look fantastic in this walnut. This one's probably gonna be my favorite. Dry. Welcome to the next day. It's time to trim some miters and see how cool the joints look. And I don't ask very often, but if you do enjoy my videos, I would like if you maybe like this video and shared it. It's an easy way to help out the channel. And like I said, I don't like to ask very often. Yes, I put pop-ups on screen, but feel free to like and subscribe. It sounds kind of corny saying it out loud. Let's clean up some miters. There's lots of ways we can trim these up, but I have a bandsaw and it's by far the easiest way. I'm gonna cut some waste off and then we'll clean it up, maybe with the block plane, probably a lot of sandpaper. So a little bit of planing, quite a bit of sanding, and a little bit of polish. Just did a quick coat of lacquer on some of them, some wax on others, just whatever was quick and easy, just because these are fake joints and I don't know what I'm gonna do with them after I do this video. Probably stack them on a shelf somewhere. The point of this, again, is not so much about the spline jig itself, but what you can do with one after you have one. It took me like 30 minutes to throw together, but the cool thing is what we do with it afterwards. And I've really found that these little 7 1/4 circular saw blades, they work really easily on a table saw, and that means you can use any type of table saw, whether it's job site, big, small, whatever. And we come up with all these really cool different joints. And then you open your creativity to what you put in the joints. You got wood veneer, you got brass, which again, yes, I think it's my favorite. And then of course, angling the blade a little bit. Starting from over here, we have just a simple picture frame type mock-up, very simple. Here's one with just a double straight splines that are with a thin kerf, then another thin kerf at an angle. And then here we got one that is much deeper at an angle for much thicker wood. If I had this to do over again, I only put one layer of the veneer in here. This veneer is very thin. I would double that up next time because you can't see the color too well. This one getting a little fancier with angles and straight. This is just some maple and walnut, which I always like. And then this one we tried with some epoxy, turned out good. I had a little bit of bleed over right here in the blue, but overall, super cool. Of course, that got a bajillion different colors you could use in patterns, so we could go anywhere with that. Now, is this epoxy as strong as the wood? Probably not, because it's a little brittle. Maybe not quite as strong as the wood veneers. It's gonna be pretty strong enough for me. And then, the all fancy, my favorite, the walnut with the brass. Used epoxy on this, not wood glue, because epoxy, of course, is gonna stick to the brass better, but man, these are freaking classy. I like them. Please leave comments down below of what kind of materials would you use to put in your miters. And 2, tell me what you think of the ones that I made. Is it a waste of time? Is it completely ridiculous? I wanna know, because I wanna know if these videos are helpful to any of you. And if they are, consider leaving a like. Thank you.